Captain Chuck Dyer, Negotiating Support Team Coordinator. And today I'm joined by Captain Scott Stratton, Chairman of the FedEx MEC, and Captain Scott Larsen, Chairman of the Negotiating Committee. First off, Scott, thanks for joining me here today. I'd like to start with you, Scott. Can you bring us up to date on the current negotiating environment in the air transport industry?
Sure. There's many components to that question, Chuck, but I'll start with the big four. First is the industry in general. And, if you remember back to 2010, it was a challenging environment. We had bankrupt carriers operating under bankrupt CBAs. We, of course, made a decision that we were not going to negotiate with those terms. So we essentially negotiated as if that didn't exist. However, it still did, and we were outliers. What's happened since is there's been significant improvement in the Delta contract twice. We've seen improvements in the United Continental situation, Alaska Airlines, Southwest, and now American and their merger. So the industry has improved quite a bit. As far as the company goes, which is a second part, if you compare it back to 2010, we had just come out of the most challenging financial situation in the company's history. We had the company who was still trying to guess, if you will, on what was going to happen into the future. Where we are now is still challenging in that they're cutting costs and they're in a margin search mode and trying to increase the margins of the Express especially, but within the company. That being said, FedEx weathered the storm very well. It's been profitable ever since. So as far as the company goes, it's also a relatively good environment and certainly improved. So I'd say those are the two big components from an environmental. More closer to home is the leadership of the union and the pilots. And the leadership is operating very well, both together at the MEC level with Scott's team and the negotiating team and the committee, so we're in good shape.
Very well. Scott Larsen, can you take that and bring us up to date on the current state of our negotiations?
Sure, Chuck. As part of the interim talks and now in Section 6, so far we've TA'd 12 sections of the contract. I think everybody knows there's 31 sections plus the FDLOA that we're currently looking at. So 12 of them have been TA'd. 11 of them weren't open. We did TA and ratify the 767 LOA. Currently, the company has 11 open sections in their court for action, and ALPA has 6 in our court that are open and for action.
Going back to Scott Stratton, since the interim contract, what comparable negotiations in the industry have taken place?
Well, that's a good question, Chuck. We saw that first out of the gate after us was Delta Airlines. They used many of the components of our agreement to get not one but 2 agreements since, and they've made tremendous progress northward. Also, during that time, we had Alaska Airlines that did the same, and now Continental and United in their merger have hooked onto the Delta contract, and now American Airlines in their merger has hooked onto the United contract. So we've seen a tremendous progress in the industry, and the trend is certainly positive.
You didn't mention UPS in there, Scott. What can you tell me about their current negotiations?
Well, their negotiations, as been stated in the news, is somewhat hooked to the other employee, the Teamster negotiations. But recently they came to agreement that if they couldn't reach an agreement with UPS Corporation in 6 months, that they would jointly petition the National Mediation Board to take their case.
Okay. With all that being said, where do you believe that leaves us today?
As far as it's compared to UPS, I think that's a positive development for the IPA, and therefore it's a positive development for us too. I think going back to your earlier question, Chuck, which is the industry, I think there's still challenges out there in the industry, but if you look at it from a pattern bargaining standpoint, all the contracts that I mentioned are heading north and getting significantly better. I think also from a consolidation standpoint, where you have Delta merging with Northwest and now United with Continental and American with US Air and America West, I think pattern bargaining will become more pronounced, and I think that also bodes well for the industry going forward.
Okay, good deal. Scotty Larsen, you mentioned all the sections that are in various courts there. I know a week or so ago you were meeting with the company. What sections were you discussing in that round of negotiations?
You know, Chuck, in the latest rounds of negotiations, we discussed things like Section 12, which is hours of service. That's where the flight time and duty time rules reside. Deadheading, Section 8, as well as scopes, which is Section 1. 13, which is leaves of absence, dealing with long-term military leave, as well as 25X, which is short-term military leave, and 25Y, which is jury duty service.
How would you characterize the developments at the table in those sections?
Well, as with most sections, the company comes in with cost-cutting, old-school, kind of low-ball proposals. It's what they've done every time. As we continue to turn the sections back and forth, we tend to get closer and closer and closer, and that's our goal. We've come in with our proposals being focused and fair. We're not asking for the moon in any of these sections. We're basing our proposals on what's realistic and what our crew members have earned.
With that in mind, looking at all these sections that are still open and in play, and obviously some of them, the positions are pretty far apart, are there any of the sections that are, I guess, for lack of a better term, mostly done?
Sure. Well, right off the bat, the 12 sections that have been TA'd that weren't opened, the 11 that weren't opened in the 767 LOA, is part of our future contract. Section 5, which is traveling expenses, is fairly close to being done, along with deadheading, Section 8 and Section 24, filling of vacancies, how we bid.
Are there any issues in those various sections that remain open that you'd like to share with the guys?
Yeah, in some of those sections, Section 5, traveling expenses per diem is still out there. That's kind of an in-game number that gets plugged in toward the end of negotiations. In deadheading, we're still having some discussions on class of service issues that exist. And in 24, it's done to the point where we're just looking to how it dovetails into other sections of the contract. As I think everybody finds when they read the contract, one section doesn't usually stand by itself. It tentacles into other sections of the contract.
Okay, fair enough. We presented our retirement proposal to the company back in January. Have we received a counter proposal from them yet?
No, we have not. And speaking to the negotiating committee, FedEx has now said that they don't plan to counter that until the end of August or beginning of September, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the final major section that we'll see coming back from the company, at least in the initial round here?
Yes. I think as Scott mentioned, Chuck, all our proposals are on the table. What we're waiting for is the counter on Section 28 from FedEx, and then all of their proposals will also be on the table at least once.
And Scott Larsen, has the company offered a proposal on health care?
They did. Company opened Section 27, which is insurance, in May of this year.
And how would you characterize that offer?
Well, as I think everybody can appreciate, health care is a very big issue, not only at FedEx, but in the country. And it requires a lot of research. And that's one of the things that we're doing right now is researching the company's proposal and formulating our counter to that. I will say about the company's initial proposal, it's very similar to what they've rolled out for the rest of the FedEx employees, and it is a cost-cutting proposal. And the company is still trying to figure out what the new rules and regulations are going to be, mainly because I don't think the government knows what all the rules and regulations are going to be. It's still being written.
Scott, also, you know, the crew room right now, there's been a lot of talk about PBS, and obviously it's a concern that goes back to beyond this negotiation, to prior negotiations. Has the company made any changes to their position in PBS at this point?
At this point, they haven't, but that's to be seen. All four of the sections where PBS was introduced by the company, which are the work rule sections of 412 and 25, and the instructor section of 11, all had elements of PBS in them. Those reside in the company's court, as it were, at this time, and we're anticipating a turn of one of the work rule sections in September, and that'll be where we'll see whether PBS is still in there or not.
Has our position changed regarding PBS?
Absolutely not. PBS, in our opinion, is not ratifiable on this property.
Okay. How can our members keep abreast of the progress in negotiations?
Well, we're committed and have been from the start to providing clear, honest communication and providing it often in a timely manner. What we've tried to do throughout, whether it's in pilot meetings, in communications, in videos, in the messages from the negotiating team, is not only to provide the information but give a feel for what's going on. Sometimes that information is not received as well as others, but it's just honest information. We're committed to continue to do that. As you know, we went into the negotiations with a warm start from the interim talks, so we kind of bypassed some of the low-hanging fruit and the easier sections and jumped right into the big sections. And now is the time that the pilots really need to stay engaged, and we're committed to provide them with that information.
Okay, Scott Larsen, is there a place on the website where there is a compilation of the sections and the progress?
There is. You go on the negotiating tab, and in there is a negotiating updating chart. That's something that we update after each week of negotiations, and it identifies not only what the sections are open, what sections have been TA'd, it also identifies who is up next on passing that section and when the last pass was made at the table.
Okay, good deal. Scott Stratton, how do you see our current status in regards to the unity challenges we faced?
Well, I think, as we've talked about many times, the company looks past the MEC, past the officer, past the negotiating committee directly to the pilots. When they see unity, they bargain. When they see division, they delay. And it's been the model that we've seen from the time we've been involved with the Airline Pilots Association and before. I think there are unity challenges out there. I think we're in great shape from a unity standpoint. That being said, the challenges are very common to all carriers. One is divide and conquer. We've seen it before. Is try to put a wedge between the pilots and the negotiating committee, and the answer is simple. My negotiating committee speaks for me. The other one is distractions. As I mentioned in a recent chairman message, I had the great pleasure to speak to some past ALPA presidents and ask them what could have been done better. And distraction was one of the key parts of the discussion. And what I found interesting, Chuck, was that when I asked what caused the distractions, it wasn't the companies, it was internal. So we want to be cautious of that. And then lastly, I think a big unity challenge is talking for management or people on the other side of the negotiating table to talk directly to the pilots. We've seen that throughout the industry, and we're not immune to that. And so pilots should be very cautious of that as well. So I think we're in good shape, but there's definitely a reason to be cautious as we enter the fall.
Okay, good to note. Any final thoughts, Scott Larsen?
No, it's been refreshing, Chuck, as negotiating committee shows up in the crew room, the support that we're receiving from everybody. It's what's needed. It reinvigorates us and emboldens us at the table to know that we have the membership support.
Super. Scott Stratton, the final word's yours.
No, I agree. I think the key is to stay informed and stay engaged. You know, we say it often, and it's true. There's only 2 teams in contract negotiation, and everybody who's listening to this is on the ALPA team.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys very much for stopping by today. And to you guys out there, you heard it from the chairman. Stay informed, stay engaged.